On May 30th, 1539, the veteran conquistador Hernando de Soto led a group of Spaniards ashore on the western coast of Florida. De Soto staked a flagpole into the sandy beach and claimed the land for the King of Spain. De Soto was not the first Spaniard to explore Florida. Juan Ponce de Leon had explored the area in 1513 and again in 1521, but he had failed in his attempt to establish a permanent Spanish colony in Florida. Another Spaniard, Panfilo de Narvaez, had tried to conquer Florida but did not succeed. Narvaez landed on the west coast of Florida in 1527 with 600 men. He and his men marched inland in search of gold. They attacked the natives and were attacked by them in return. Many Spaniards were killed. After experiencing little progress, Narvaez and his men decided to make their way to the Gulf Coast to Spanish outposts in Mexico. They hurriedly constructed makeshift boats to sail along the coast. Many of the men died of dehydration on this voyage. Some of the boats drifted off, and the men on them were never heard from again. Just when Narvaez and his men thought things could not get any worse, a hurricane hit, sinking their boats, drowning many of the men, and leaving the few survivors stranded on a beach near present-day Galveston, Texas. In the end, of the 600 men who set off on the voyage, only 4 men managed to get back to Mexico alive to tell the tale. So if you take a look at this map that you see here, the reddish line is showing you where Panfilo de Narvaez went. So you can see he's on the west coast of Florida and along the Gulf of Mexico into Mexico. And everywhere that you see a star is where there were battles with the native people. Hernando de Soto knew about the explorations of Ponce de Leon and Narvaez. He knew it would be dangerous to explore Florida, but he felt he could achieve more than the men who had explored before him. After all, de Soto had been in Peru with Francisco Pizarro, one of the most successful of all the conquistadors. When Pizarro captured the Inca emperor, Atahualpa, de Soto had helped collect the great ransom of silver and gold that made Pizarro very rich. And De Soto, too, became a very wealthy man through his relationship with Pizarro. Hernando de Soto believed he could make even more money by conquering Florida and gathering up the gold that was rumored to be there. De Soto invested much of his own money in his Florida expedition, and he prepared for it carefully. De Soto signed up lots of other experts, including soldiers, sailors, tailors, shoemakers, engineers, and priests. Most of the 700 men on his expedition were Spaniards, but there were a number of recruits from other countries in Europe. The expedition sailed from Spain in April of 1538. After a year in Cuba, De Soto and his men sailed to Florida, arriving at the end of May in 1539. I'm going to pause here and refer you to the notes page if you have it in front of you. And at the top, it asks you what were the motivating factors for Hernando de Soto. So I will reread one of the sentences you just heard. Hernando de Soto believed he could make even more money by conquering Florida and gathering up the gold that was rumored to be there. So you can hear that one of his main motivating factors was to make money and to find gold. De Soto sent a scouting party inland and discovered an abandoned Indian village. Finding abandoned Indian villages was not unusual. By this time, many native people had learned that the arrival of Spaniards was usually not good news. Many chiefs decided the safest course of action was to abandon their villages. That way they could avoid the Spanish. Sometimes the Indians would return to the village later, after the Spanish had moved away. De Soto and his men established a base in the abandoned village and began to explore the surrounding land. They made a remarkable discovery on their exploration. They found a Spaniard who had been living among the natives and had learned a little of their language. His name was Juan Ortiz, and he had been a member of the disastrous Narvaez expedition. Juan Ortiz had been treated cruelly by one Native American chieftain and was later adopted by another tribe. The Spanish were astonished to find him living like a native. Native Americans would sometimes adopt outsiders, including Europeans, into their tribes, even though their experience taught them that Europeans were interested in conquering their lands. The Spanish listened to his stories and made Ortiz one of their translators. There is one example of an interaction between the Spaniards and Native Americans. It said that sometimes the tribes would adopt De Soto left some men near the coast and took some other men to explore inland. He and his men made their way through swamps and forests. They found more deserted villages and helped themselves to whatever food and supplies were left behind. Some of the natives attacked the Spaniards as they marched. They would ambush or attack De Soto and his men in the swamps and then run away. De Soto fought back. To discourage others from attacking, De Soto's strategy was to be vicious early on. That way, De Soto thought, word would get around that he and his men were not worth attacking, and that might actually save more of his men in the end. As De Soto moved inland, he would frequently take natives as prisoners and use them as guides in the new land. By mid-September, De Soto and his men arrived at a village called Napatuca. The local chief, Vitachuco, seemed friendly, but Juan Ortiz told De Soto that this friendliness might be an act. Ortiz had heard rumors that Vitachuco was plotting against De Soto. De Soto decided to take no chances. He attacked the people of Napatuca and took Vitachuco prisoner. Even though he was a prisoner, Vitachuco wasn't treated as poorly as other prisoners. He was allowed to keep some of his servants and often ate with De Soto. De Soto thought that if he kept the chief in comfortable surroundings, Vitachuco and his people would cooperate with him. This strategy seemed to be working until one night Vitachuco and his people attacked. The Spaniards eventually won this battle and killed Vitachuco. Here you heard a few more examples of how the Spaniards interacted with Native Americans. They would attack them, they would be vicious, they would take natives as prisoners, and sometimes, as the example of Vitachuco shows, the natives would fight back.